scientific death.
In the 1950s, the United States detonated over 100 nuclear weapons above ground in Nevada. The Atomic Energy Commission repeatedly assured the public that these tests were contained, controlled, and safe for anyone outside the immediate blast radius. Thousands of miles downwind, far beyond any restricted zone, an unexplainable agricultural crisis was tearing through American farms. Ranchers began pulling lambs from pens, only to find a wall and skin sloughing off in their hands. They described the animals as looking like they had been baked from the inside out. Simultaneously, across the Midwest, millions of acres of healthy wheat were failing to mature, dying off in numbers that baffled local agronomists. This deposition map from the 1953 Upshot Knothole Test Series tracks the path of radioactive isotopes like iodine-131 and strontium-90. These microscopic particles traveled across the continent on high-altitude winds and washed down on pastures and crop fields in localized rainstorms. The fallout created a highly selective pattern of damage, decimating certain species while leaving their direct neighbors entirely untouched. This raises an analytical question. Why did sheep suffer such horrific injuries while cattle grazing in the same field survived? The exposure vector was direct. Radioactive dust settled onto the food supply, and grazing animals consumed the particles alongside their forage. Once swallowed, iodine-131 bypasses general digestion and absorbs rapidly into the thyroid gland, hyperconcentrating a massive dose of radiation into a single biological control center. Data from the 1950s revealed that microdoses as low as 15 nanocuries triggered severe growth retardation and systemic reproductive failure. Pregnant ewes exposed to these levels stopped giving birth to viable offspring. For livestock, survival depended on how their specific glandular biology processed these invisible heavy metals. A different metabolic logic governed the botanical crisis. Massive die-offs plagued winter wheat, yet spring-sown crops in the same counties remained healthy. When ionizing radiation penetrates plant tissue, it disrupts atomic structures, scrambling the cellular division process the plant relies on to grow. Winter wheat is planted in the fall and must hibernate through March and April. These were the absolute peak months for atmospheric nuclear testing in the Nevada desert. Prolonged exposure to fallout during this critical phase systematically eroded the wheat's cellular cold tolerance, stripping away its biological armor. The radiation worked indirectly, leaving the wheat vulnerable to freezing and rupturing during standard winter temperatures. Spring crops bypassed this window because they were sown later in the year, avoiding the acute testing period and the need for biological hibernation. The decimation of the winter wheat crop was a catastrophic alignment of the plant's natural clock with the government's detonation schedule. The data reveals the economic scale of the damage. For every 1,000 nanocuries of iodine-131 deposited on a county, farmers suffered a 6.1% drop in yield per acre. This map from the 1957 Plumb Bob Test Series tracks the repeated waves of fallout that blanketed the nation. Over the decade, millions of bushels of wheat were wiped out, and farmers abandoned millions of acres of land. But farmers faced a bureaucratic hurdle. U.S. agricultural policy operated on strict use-it-or-lose-it acreage allotments. Leaving a field unharvested could mean the permanent loss of future growing quotas. To avoid financial ruin from lost quotas, farmers were pressured to overplant the following season, churning the same highly irradiated soil. Under this administrative pressure, structurally compromised, irradiated crops were continuously funneled into the domestic food supply without public knowledge. The destructive power of the atomic age reached far beyond the blast radius in the desert. It became a silent biological chain reaction, amplified by government policy, that permanently wove itself into the soil and sustenance of the American heartland.